Welcome back. So on this Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day, we discussed the state of race relations in America and on the Suncoast. Do you remember 8 years ago when many were saying the election of Barack Obama, the first African-American president, was the dawn of post-racial America? Last week, during his farewell address to the nation, the president said that was never realistic. Under Donald Trump, many fear it will get even worse. Yes, he went into black communities during the campaign, but many members of that community have not forgiven Mr. Trump for leading the fight to demand the president produce his birth certificate. So where are we and what are the prospects under President Trump? We're joined now by Rod Thompson, president of the Sarasota Republican Club and former Sarasota City Commissioner, and Mayor Fred Atkins. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today. You know, in Dwayne's piece, we did a part about the 10-point plan that the president-elect is proposing, but the conversation on that has been sidetracked over the last few days over the controversy involving John Lewis and the comments of Mr. Trump to Congressman Lewis. You know, Rod, your day job is to run a PR company,
right? And
I'm sure you tell your clients to stay on message,
right? Yeah, I can safely say I've never had a client like Donald Trump before, who had never stayed on message throughout the campaign, by and large. But I think that this whole situation here is setting the stage for something that is unfortunate and probably really unhelpful going into President-elect Trump's presidency. Meaning that you have a sitting congressman, respected for his civil rights past, but now very much a Democrat partisan, who is a sitting member of Congress, and he says this is not a legitimate president, undermining to the entire world the leader of our country. I think his remark was far more out of line than Trump's response to his remark.
Fred, you know, there are Democrats who wish that Congressman Lewis didn't go there.
Well, Congressman Lewis has been a grown man a long time, so I respect him to the utmost. But I think that President-elect Trump has said some things prior to this as it relates to the undermining of the election that is far more blatantly obvious than anything that the congressman said. That is coupled together, it means that nothing is really happening but a ball of confusion, and somebody knows the truth.
And let me ask you this, Rod, because I think what has people so angry about the president-elect's response to this is to accuse Congressman Lewis of being all talk. I mean, this is a guy who had his skull cracked open. Right. A little bit more than no talk. And the other thing is when he said that Congressman Lewis's congressional district in Georgia is blighted and falling apart, where the truth is it's a pretty diverse community.
It is. So Trump got his facts wrong there, and not first time. However, I think in the overarching picture you can say about John Lewis that he did heroic, honorable thing during the civil rights movement. I don't know how long you get to immunity from criticism for your actions as a public elected official for 30-some years from that time. So yeah, his district's doing pretty well. It's in Atlanta, which has done very well over the last several decades for a number of reasons and all. I'm not sure that any of the prescriptions for the black community that Congressman Lewis has endorsed have benefited the black community in any way, and I think Trump has a very effective list.
You have a look on your face.
I'm appalled. He just contradicted himself by saying that Atlanta is doing very well and that's the congressman's district. Well, some of those prescriptions were prescribed by the congressman, and he supported and brought jobs and, I mean, abundance of programs, even the airport, and all the other businesses that have come to Atlanta and brought into the space where it is now under African-American mayors and leadership.
Okay, we are just getting started. We will return to our discussion of race relations coming up, along with a check on our weather, so stay with us. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we are discussing the expectations for race relations under a Trump administration. Our guests tonight are Rod Thompson, president of the Sarasota Republican Club, and Fred Atkins, a former mayor and city commissioner in Sarasota. But before we get back into our discussion, I had a chance to interview Donald Trump during the campaign. It was just after he asked the minority community, "What do you have to lose?" Take a look.
When we talk to folks, they're saying, you know, I know that you're saying that you can improve their community, but some of them are still angry that
Well,
you accused President Obama of not being from this country.
Let me explain something to you. The African-American community has been amazing over the last couple of weeks. The poll numbers have been great. The levels of poverty have never been greater. The educational process has been a disaster. People are being shot in the streets. I mean, and I tell African Americans and Latinos, I say, you vote for me, it won't be that way. We're going to fix the education system. We're going to create housing. We're going to raise, I mean, you look at the levels of poverty if you're African American, 40%, it's horrible. We're going to solve these problems. And I say, if they give me a chance, they're going to be so happy with the result.
But I want to ask you both the same question. Is it an obstacle in terms of getting support from the African American community that Donald Trump questioned the citizenship of President Obama?
I think we've grown past that. I truly believe that questioning the citizenship of Obama, our president, was his ploy to get him to where he is right now. He has used a very cold tactic that has worked in America.
Rod?
I don't think it'll be any obstacle now. I think most people have moved beyond it.
All right, question number 2. CNN did this great show last week, The Messy Truth with Van Jones, and they were discussing gun violence and the crime in Chicago. And someone on the broadcast suggested the best way to deal with inner city crime is to start building factories. And because if you have a job, then you don't have time to be in a gang. And I'm wondering what the both of you would think to that, and offering companies who want to do so some kind of tax incentive to do just that. Because in the end, wouldn't that cost less than what you're paying to incarcerate people and the cost of the courts?
Yes. I mean, I go all the way back to Jack Kemp and enterprise zones and his original idea for that. I think that sort of thing has some merit, particularly in places like Detroit and Chicago and areas like that that have real blighted areas, that have a lot of people that are out of work. A lot of young men out of work is just a recipe for problems right there. We know that.
Where did these programs go? There were a lot of them out there.
There were, and I think that what always happens is all politics are local, and local politics got involved with things, and I can't tell you, I'm a little more familiar with the Detroit one, and there were local politics involved that undermined the whole process there. But I think that there is some value there. I think there's greater value to other elements of Trump's plan, though, than the sort of the tax efforts that could be done for inner city areas to attract business. Sure, businesses, but they need to have workers that are able to take those jobs and do them. And so I think there's a step back that needs to happen first, and that's in education.
Fred?
No doubt. What happened to enterprise zones and the CETA program was Congress and their state legislations that decided that you shouldn't help inner city youth, you shouldn't help businesses and communities, and they were practically dominated in the state of Florida, because I was a member of the enterprise zone here in Sarasota. And there was no reason for the state to withdraw that process and support, other than they didn't want it to happen anymore because they was too busy using taxing and fees for other projects that they wanted to do.
You know, I remember, especially in the late 80s, early 90s, there were a whole lot of community block grant programs to do just that. But there's been such an emphasis as of the early 1990s on cutting the federal budget and getting the fat out of it, that many of these programs have gone away.
That might be a rhetorical emphasis. You sure don't see it in the numbers of the federal budget, which just has blossomed like a pregnant woman. I mean, the federal budget is massive, and it's grown dramatically in the time period you mentioned.
The struggle is that the Republican Party has masqueraded as a low tax, low incentive type program for the governmental job creation. But in reality, what they do is just move the money and enhance it. Because if you look back over the years, the Republican administrations have raised the taxes far more than any other administration. And they've made sure that the people of the communities didn't get it, basically other entities.
Okay, I got to challenge
Rod is shaking his head wildly.
Yeah, because the Republican administrations have raised taxes far more than any other. It's just absurd. Clearly, starting with Reagan, there was dramatic tax cuts throughout the 80s. And then Bush's tax cuts, which had to sunset, unfortunately. W. Bush had massive tax cuts, too. Bill Clinton did not have those massive tax cuts. He had certain tax changes, but they edged up the whole time in the 90s. So to say that is just factually wrong.
Check the record. Check the record. It is very clear.
Let's move on. Rod, when you were interviewed for Dwayne's story, you talked about the importance of education, which I don't think anybody would deny. And our schools, to some measure, are getting better, but there's a lot of talk in Sarasota and Sarasota County that the schools are not equal in terms of the dispersal of the best teachers and the best resources.
Right, and I suspect that's true. I think that's exactly like we talked on a previous program, what Eric Robinson was trying to find out as far as the spending at Booker. There's a budgeted amount for that school. He wanted to know how much is actually spent there, and he was voted down on getting that, and the administration is not going to give him that. That's something that I think everybody should know. I think people in the black community want to know, is there adequate spending going on there, or is more money being sent to the Pine Views and the Venice Highs and that sort of place?
But you also talk about vouchers.
Yeah, I think part of Trump's plan actually is school choice, and that's something that I'm very much in favor of. I think the more school choice, the better. I think in Washington, D.C., you had a very effective school choice program that was 100% minority used. It was beloved by those who were able to use it. It was small and started, but when President Obama came into office and the Democrat Congress, they killed it. They killed it, I would say, because of the politics of the teachers union opposing it.
Fred?
Well, definitely. The state of Florida and Sarasota County is going to school choice coming up this year. So any youth throughout Sarasota County, if there's a vacancy at a school, they can move to that. I have no problem with school choice. I think that's vitally important. I got a serious problem with vouchers because what it does is rape the school system of its funds and take it to private entities so that they can shepherd the money in the direction they want to. Then they cherry pick the students from the public school system and leave the public school system in worse shape than it was before they started.
And that would be the argument that you
often
often
is the argument. The counter argument to that is that if the vouchers follow the students, they follow the choice of the parents. Why shouldn't the tax-paying parents have some choice in where their money is spent? I think that's a reasonable argument.
We have less than a minute left, so in 30 seconds or less, are we going to start seeing a lowering of the temperatures in terms of the racial tensions that we've been seeing for the last 18 months?
Amazingly so. I believe that that is a fact. Because what happened with the President Barack Obama was that the energy of racism blossomed because there was an African American at the top of this country. And so all of the deviants came out to attack that process. Now it's another day of coming.
Rod?
I disagree. I do agree that race relations got worse under President Obama. I don't think it was for the reasons that Fred just described, though.
So what reason you think?
Because I think that President Obama made race an issue in a lot of places where it wasn't an issue. He jumped in too quickly on the wrong side. Ferguson and Boston had two of those.
All right, we're going to take a quick break and wrap up our discussion in just a few minutes, plus what some of our viewers are saying about the closing of the Ringling Brothers Circus. So stay with us. Welcome back. What kind of impact will the Trump administration have on race relations in the nation? And here on the Suncoast, our guests join us now for final thoughts. You guys were going into it just great before, and I'm sure our audience would want you to pick it up. But let's look to the future. And Rod, let me start with you in terms of it's a new day. We're going to have a new president. Do you have any real hopes for easing of the simmering tensions?
You know, hope springs eternal, right? And so I do. The realist in me is kind of groaning because of the response, you know, to Trump and the situation right now. But I think there is some hope. I think Trump does have a solid plan. And as I was telling Dwayne during the interview, that if he can get the backing of Congress to carry out a number of the elements of his plan, I think it will improve things in the black community. If things improve in the black community, then that's the bottom line. If people see things getting better, they're not going to hold past indiscretions against him.
There's a big but there. Do you think that this Congress is going to back substantial funding for all these programs in the black community?
Well, you know, I hope the Congress get in line with the president, because I believe that we have an opportunity to do some things here, because they have no excuses to attack the president anymore. So with the reality of the situation, I believe that Trump reminds me so much of Richard Nixon, another monster in the White House that's going to do far better than we ever imagined. And so I'm expecting him to get some things done in Congress, because it's vitally important that he looks good.
Kind of like the Nixon goes to China thing?
Yeah, exactly. But I think really one of the hallmarks of his campaign was to build the wall and the whole immigration thing. That could actually very much be in favor of the black community, because if you start removing, not rounding up, but when you start slowly eliminating millions of uneducated, illiterate, unskilled workers from another country, taking the low-end jobs and keeping the low-end not only the pay scale reduced, but also taking away that first rung opportunity. That's going to help other low-income Americans who are here and will do those jobs.
Other discussion, but Fred, I'll give you the last word.
Hello. We don't want the low-end jobs. We want some of the middle-income jobs in America. No, we don't. We've been starting here for 400 years. How long is it going to, for us to be respected and get the real jobs of America?
Again, you guys get great when I have to say goodnight. So thanks a lot for that. Before we go, we want to share with you what some of our viewers are saying about the Ringling Brothers Circus shutting down. After 146 years, the greatest show on earth will be no more. Parent company Feld Entertainment says the high cost of production along with a decline in ticket sales is the reason for ending the show. The circus also lost sales after accusations of animal cruelty because of the use of elephants. Here is what some of you are saying. Katie Miranda Sterling writes, sad but happy for the animals to go into retirement. We quit going to the circus a long time ago because of the animals. Mary Della Valle writes, circuses are a thing of the past. Speaking as someone who lost 2 family members in the July 1944 Hartford circus fire, which was a huge incident. Can't really say I am sorry for this one closing, but I feel sorry for the employees about to lay off. And Rod, you're going to love this one. And Donna Jean writes, so sad, I guess they just can't compete with the Trump circus. Most of the clowns are going to the White House to be headed up by the biggest clown of all. Sorry, it was there and it was too good not to use. If you'd like to join the conversation about tonight's topic, just visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/news@7. And FYI, want to watch past Roundtable discussions? They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. Thanks to our guests for being here tonight, and they're actually friends. Rod Thompson is president of the Sarasota Republican Club, and Fred Atkins is the former mayor and city commissioner of Sarasota.